Good day, everyone. In this micro lecture, we're going to be unpacking Fisher's framework as well as a very important strategy developed by Professor Hao Li examining uncertainty. All of this will be done within the context of supply chain strategy, both lean and agile, where we will examine various different supply chain designs. Fisher's framework was first developed by Marshall Fisher in 1997, published in the Harvard Business Review, and it examines how to choose the right supply chain for your product based upon demand uncertainty. So, Fisher considered two different types of products. Broadly speaking, all products and services can be divided into one of these two categories. Functional products, which are usually simple products with low margins due to high competition and low demand uncertainty, and innovative products that have a higher demand uncertainty and high profit margins. So, the product type will inform the supply chain design. When we look at our processes themselves, you could have different supply chain processes, both physically efficient processes, looking at a high utilization rate, low unit cost through mass productions, or a market responsive process, which is more agile and more lean. Both of these processes speak to the functional and innovative products outlined by Marshall Fisher. When it comes to functional products, they match very nicely with an efficient supply chain due to the low uncertainty and relatively low margins. On the other hand, innovative products fit in with a responsive supply chain due to the opposite. They've got higher margins and a higher level of demand uncertainty. This brings us to Professor Lee's uncertainty framework, where he looked at supply uncertainty, and he used the terms stable and evolving to describe supply processes, where stable processes had a well-established manufacturing processes and they were quite mature. Evolving processes, on the other hand, were in the early phases of development and rapidly changing, therefore the relative uncertainty would of course be higher. These stable versus evolving processes each had varying degrees of problems that they yielded to supply chain managers. From stable processes having less breakdowns and higher yields, more supply sources, on the other hand, your evolving processes being more vulnerable, on the other hand, and having potential quality problems, being inflexible, difficult to change over. So, of course, approaching each of these processes with a management framework requires a nuanced approach. So, Lee developed an uncertainty framework where he looked at demand and supply uncertainty and he grouped these products: high innovative products, low functional products in terms of demand uncertainty, and stable and evolving processes on the supply side. So, what does this mean? It means that before we even set up a supply chain strategy, we've got to understand the underlying uncertainties and take steps to reduce this. When it comes to demand uncertainty, we have to have good information sharing and coordination. We could engage in collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment. For supply uncertainty, it's about the free exchange of information, early design and supplier collaboration, and supplier hubs. So, all of these talk to a closeness in your supply chain network and building trust and information sharing. So, Lee's uncertainty framework basically unpacked these processes as the following. So, if we look at this matrix diagram, demand and supply uncertainty on either side of the diagram, low uncertainty, high uncertainty for both, and functional versus innovative products. You would find that for functional products with a low demand uncertainty and a stable process, you need an efficient supply chain. For a functional product where you've got an evolving process or high supply uncertainty, you need a risk hedging supply chain. And the opposite's true for innovative products, where you've got responsive supply chain and agile supply chain, respectively. Now, ideally, you want to reduce uncertainty and get towards a stable process. You want to avoid these evolving processes because, of course, as much as agile supply chains are great development in the field of supply chain management, it is a difficult undertaking for managers. There's a lot of variables to consider in this approach. And of course, remember, you're dealing with uncertainty, a higher level of uncertainty. So ideally, you would want to move from high demand uncertainty to low demand uncertainty. It would just make your life easier. So it's apparent from all of this that there's no one size fits all situation. We can use lean strategies on one end of our supply chain and agile strategies on the other end of the supply chain. There's no one size fits all approach when it comes to strategy. Therefore, and you will find this diagram in your textbook by Christopher Tohill et al., it is a taxonomy for selecting global supply chain strategies, looking at lead times and both the level of uncertainty in demand, predictable versus unpredictable demand. So the authors provide a taxonomy or a framework for us to be able to select an appropriate global supply chain strategies. So use this framework when it comes to analyzing cases to select the best possible strategy. And of course, you could have what we call a legile supply chain. And this is a supply chain that has lean up to the decoupling point, and then from the decoupling point, you've got the agile portion. Like in laptop manufacturing, you could have a lean approach to produce the various components. And then once the customer places the order, that standardized component is then taken and customized or assembled in a way to create a unique product for that customer. That speaks to the legile approach. So the Agile approach is a generally accepted paradigm for combining both lean and agile. They're not mutually exclusive approaches, of course, they partner really well together. So when we look at overall supply chain strategy, we must not just get stuck in a silo. Focus on the processes and the high level objectives. Leverage off the right people and the importance of people. And remember, ultimately, it is your supply chain that competes. Thank you very much.